Hey, Matt.
Yes, Ryan.
In a world of locked rooms, the man with the key is the king. And honey, you should see me in a crown.
So what you're saying is we need to make a trip to Burger King. Is that what you're insinuating? Okay.
Absolutely. And I feel like y'all should listen to this.
Let's do it.
Welcome back, everybody. This is a podcast called Hey, Listen to This. I am Ryan Kearns.
And I am Matt Durzik.
And this is a podcast where each week we dissect an album, not like, like bit by bit, but track by track. Me and Matt take turns each week picking an album that we want to listen to for one reason or another, and we just give our feelings about it. I mean, a lot of the times our tastes do align, but sometimes our tastes actually do differ. Sometimes we fight about what's better, Swamp or Misty Mountain Hop, or
Yeah.
But yeah, so this week it was Matt's turn to pick the album that we're going to dissect.
It was my turn, and this is chapter 3 in our 4-part series of, I don't know what we would call it, I guess, Challenge Month or Switcheroo Month. Because for the majority of the podcast leading up to this month, we had been discussing albums, and I had tended to pick older albums. Ryan had tended to pick newer albums. So I was like, let's switch things up. Let's do the next 4 albums where we each pick the opposite. I'll pick newer, and Ryan will pick older. So this is my second of the newer category, and I decided to go with an album that I had not listened to before. I had heard of it, but I had not listened to before. It was When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? By one Billie Eilish.
Not to be confused with Billie Eilish.
No, not to be confused with Billie Eilish.
And why did you pick this album, my dude?
A couple reasons. Number one, for some reason, maybe it was coincidence or maybe it's just that time of year, but I decided, hey, let's go for another album that was the winner of Grammy Album of the Year, much like Babel was. And secondly, this of course was the album that featured a couple singles off of it and really launched Billie Eilish into the spotlight. Like, I know she'd been sort of underground for a little bit before this album came out, but all of a sudden she was everywhere. She was at the Grammys. She had one of the bigger hits of last year in the Barbie movie. So, yeah, it made Billie Eilish a star. And today we're going to figure out if we agree with the hype or whether we feel that this is all a trend that is ruining and destroying America.
It's interesting that you mentioned the whole trend aspect, because I was talking to my wife a little bit earlier about this album, and it might have been a couple days ago, but I digress. And she pointed out this style of music would be interesting for myself to explore, because it's more of a TikTokification of music. And I feel like as a whole, this is going to be a very interesting album for both of us to dissect, because this is our first true pop album that we're dissecting. I feel like the closest thing that we had to a pop album was Jesus, and even at that, that's an experimental hip hop album that really didn't have that many big singles, big hits off of it. So props to you for selecting this album, because when you first said that this was the album that you wanted for us to dissect, I was just like, oh, okay, is Matt trying to lower our age demographic for our podcast? But no, this was actually a true not true testament, but it's an interesting album, to say the least.
Agreed. And there are some points where we may think, okay, this is not for us, and then there are going to be points where we say, yeah, this is absolutely for us. And a lot of it may go back to some of the stuff we've talked about before in previous albums. So I say we get right into it with, I guess, the first two tracks, because the first track technically is, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 exclamation points is the opening track on this album.
Yeah, and like, to be honest with you, it is meant to just be like a true opener. Like, I didn't watch the Bad Guy music video in preparation for this podcast, but apparently, like, this opening skit is the introduction to that music video. So really a whole lot not to it. And for those of you who are kind of, like, morbidly curious, like, it's basically Billie and I think it's her brother joking around and being like, my Invisalign is out, and this is the start of the album. And all truth be told, that's what I maybe should have went with in terms of a intro to our podcast here. But I couldn't pass up the opportunity to reference one of my favorite shows / favorite characters in the show. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. So, like, yeah, it's just a opening skit, and it leads into, like, the biggest single off the album, Bad Guy.
Yes, Bad Guy, the song that made her a star and won all the awards, and I believe it went all the way to number 1 in the U.S. Yeah, it did. Very interesting track, and not your typical pop song, especially for when it came out. It was more along the lines of a... what kind of vibe would you describe it? Because I'm struggling to find a finite category to put the song.
I would say, like, I like the only comparison that I can make in terms of, like, a stylistic sense. It kind of reminded me of that minimalist pop feel that Lorde was going with Royals. Like, if Royals is, like, the bright, sunny, like, child in a family, Bad Guy is essentially the Wednesday Addams in that case. Like, completely dark, like, still, like, the same, like, the same nuts and bolts and the same structure is there, but it's a whole different kind of flavor.
Yeah. In a sense, you could almost say that Lorde's stuff that she had back in 2013 was more or less like the Morticia to the Wednesday that bore from it. Because Morticia was very much in a sense of, she definitely had that darkness, but she also had the elegance and grace. And similarly, a song like Royals definitely had the minimalist sense to it, but also had enough whereabouts of, like, oh yeah, I still need to have the big chorus and the big, powerful vocals. This song doesn't have any of that. This song has very sleepy vocals throughout, almost very, almost bit-crushed vocals in a sense, or very warbly vocals. And
yeah, and like, I hate to interrupt you, but, like, I feel like with this being the biggest song and the, like, like, the first, like, true song off the album, like, props to Billie and her team for, like, sequencing this album this way, because if you don't like this song, if you don't like the vocals, you could probably turn off the album at this point.
Yeah, pretty much, because that is a theme that does come back time and time again on this album, are those vocals. But I think what really pushed this song to the top, because I know I just mentioned that it doesn't have any, like, conventional vocals compared to, like, Lorde and other minimalist pop stuff, it does have a beat. It has a catchy beat. It has a hook, which is one of those rarest of breeds, especially in the new age. Well, not as much as I think now that I think about it. But because there seems to be an increasing number of songs where the hook is instrumental. some songs I can think of right off the top of my head. Harlem Shake, Going Down for Real. Might as well put Gangnam Style in there because Gangnam Style is just a word that they repeat over and over again.
Yeah. Well, that and Party Rock Anthem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can say
but I would say, like, comparing, like, all this tracks to Bad Guy here, I would take Bad Guy 10 times out of 10. Like, like, you're talking about, like, that little synth hook and that heavy bass line that is absolutely pretty solid to, like, at least, like, set the groundwork for the song. And, like, even, like... with an album like this, you have to be able, like, you can put this on in the background and you can be like, yeah, hey, this is pretty decent, like, you can vibe to this. But then, like, there's a whole other layer to it that if you actually, like, listen to, like, the little elements here or there, like, it's actually somewhat decent. Is it, like, absolutely, like, blow your brain out of the water? No. Like, there's moments where they have that little, like, staccato rhythm. I don't know what exactly lyric set that she does it in, but like, it matches up with, like, the synths and the vocals match up where it's just like da 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 da, and, like, stuff like that. Always, like, I will always, like, give points to artists who do, like, like, musical stuff like that, at the risk of sounding redundant.
No, that's fine. And honestly, I think one of my favorite musical parts of the song is in that chorus, the percussive nature of it. I guess it might be like a synth beat that coordinates with these finger snaps, these really loud finger snaps on the beat. Yeah. I thought that was very good. I'll also point out that the end of the track, where it goes into halftime and it's introduced by this sort of laughing. My first thought was, oh, so you have listened to Igor too. You are a woman of taste. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think, like, the first time the couple of the spins I did a Bad Guy, like, I might have just skipped past the ending because, like, when the first time that came across, I'm like, oh, I didn't know this was. I didn't know that this was here, man. This is a nice room here. But before we wrap up discussion on Bad Guy and go over to Zanny, one thing I do want to, like, point out, because it's going to be a theme throughout, like, multiple tracks off the album, is the relationship dynamic that Billie is setting between herself and this bad guy. So, like, this song is basically about mixing of toxic people, like, bad guy meets bad type. So, like, you think about lyrics of, like, so you're a tough guy, like a really rough guy, so just can't get enough guy, chest always so puffed guy, I'm the bad type, make your mama sad type, make your girlfriend mad type, might seduce your dad type. And, like, I feel like there's so many instances off the album, and, like, we're gonna be able to get into it, where, like, this right here lays the groundwork for what a lot of the album is. Like, it's exploring relationships with toxic people, and for Billie to layer such a, I don't know, like, a dark message on top of, like, such a, like, a funky and, like, happy beat. Well, I wouldn't say it's a happy beat, but, like, such a funky beat that, like, if someone just to put it on, they really wouldn't think about it. Like, it almost kind of makes me think of, like, our last review where we were talking about, like, the Smiths and, like, the song Cemetery Gates, where Morrissey was contemplating his own morality, but he has, like, such a happy tone to him. Like, it's really cool, man.
That's a good comparison. I do think it warrants that. It does have that sense of irony of putting such a sour set of lyrics over this, again, very upbeat, very jaunty groove that does pretty much, I wouldn't say the majority of the work, but definitely is the focal point of this of the song. Not taking anything away from the lyrics, but Billie Eilish knows pop, and this track proves it.
Yeah. So, you ready to move on to Zanny?
Let's move on to Zanny, man.
So, why don't you tell everybody what is it about them? What's going on with Zanny here?
Well, Zanny, for those who don't know what Zanny means, it is not even short because it's literally the same amount of letters. But Zanny is code or slang for Xanax, Xanax, which is a pill that people apparently take to be happy. I have never taken it, and I hope I never get into a point in my life where I do, although if you do and it helps you, more power to you.
Yeah.
That being said, this song is about those who perhaps use Xannies in a context of very vapid nature, very party-like nature. Like, they don't take Xanax because it's the right thing to do. They take it because it's the cool thing to do. And basically, it takes the notion that you meant, the theme of the last song, up a level to pretty much be as direct as possible, saying, oh, these are people who are not only toxic, but they're ingesting toxic chemicals into their body, and I don't really see a point in doing that to myself or being with them.
Yeah, yeah. And it's almost about like that escapism element and like the it's a the song itself, it's a departure compared to like, Bad Guy, where like instead of getting like, a straight up like pop song with like, a thudding bass and like that little interesting like synth loop, you just get like, it's primarily featuring like Billy's vocals, and the muted and the defeated's vocals kind of, they do work well here. But yeah, the song is basically all about her exploring like that relationship with the pill, like and yeah, like lyrics like, what is it about them? I must be missing something. They just keep doing nothing. Too intoxicated to be scared. Like, that is just talking about like, maybe it's exploring the dynamic that Billy might be looking at, like people who are on pills and like, hey, like I must be missing something here, and like, um and she sees these people who are on this pill and how they just are doing nothing and they're just too intoxicated to just feel anything. And maybe like, like the mindset of like, pills changes whenever that chorus hits, because like you hear that huge bass that comes crashing in during that chorus, and it could be that effect of like, just having that pill in your system.
Exactly, and it's a good thing you mentioned the bass, because musically this song reminds me of Bound 2 in a sense, actually, because there's such a contrast between the melody on the verses and the melody on the chorus, and particularly the production on both of them as well, because the verses almost sound like this very singer-song, excuse me, singers and standards type of almost jazzy melody. The harmonies are very reminiscent of the 30s and 40s. And yet when that chorus comes in, like you said, that bass just boom! It just comes in full force, like it did on the Uncle Charlie Wilson parts of Bound 2, where you're just like, oh, this is different. I like it, but it's different. And does present that nice contrast of the two styles, sort of the old Hollywood style, and that's appropriate too, because I feel like this song very much encapsulates her sort of home area of Los Angeles, where people like to go to parties and do high-end drugs, and mixing that with the tone of pop that she is trying to achieve on this album. I think this song is very effective in doing that.
Yeah. To encapsulate that, and one comment that I'm gonna have to make about like, Billy's target demographic is like, well, I'll make that comment now, then I'll encapsulate our discussion about Zanny here. Is that all like when before I listened to this album, I knew that her target demographic was like, young adults, teenagers, and like all that, like the essentially like, probably like take our generation minus one or two. Let's be real, Matt. And like for the first two tracks to be about like toxicity and like the relationship that people have with like medication and drugs and just the I don't know. It's an interesting thing to like have your target demographic. I'm sure Billie didn't mean for this to be her target demographic, but this is what kids are listening to nowadays, man.
It is, and we'll get to why that may or may not be a good thing later. But to wrap this one up, honestly, I was digging it the second time around. It was interesting the first time around, but the second time around, I was like, yeah, this song definitely does it for me. I wouldn't say it's in the top song of the album, but it's definitely in the upper half.
Yeah, like I feel like Zanny for like a majority of the songs off of this album, like it's a decent to good song. Is it an amazing song? No, but like I'm not offended by it. And if it were to come on like a playlist that while I'm driving, I'm not gonna skip it. But like it's a good song. Nothing I can really poke holes at. And one thing I'll say to like officially put a bow on this is like how Billie's mindset is at the end of this album where she's talking about I can't afford to love someone who isn't dying by mistake in Silver Lake. And it's almost like it seems like she is taking the whole toxic mindset and just and fully embracing it and just realizing that she wants to love someone who is dying by mistake, like somebody that doesn't have their life together. I mean, I might be reading a little bit too much into it, but like it's just interesting. It almost seems like at this point she's going head on into the deep end of the darkness of this album.
I can get into that. And especially considering some of the tracks are coming up. I think your theory may prove to be a little on the true side.
Yeah. So moving on to what I am just going to come out and say is going to be my favorite track off the album. You Should See Me in a Crown.
Yes, You Should See Me in a Crown. And things definitely get back to a more up-tempo, very punchy pop sense with this. Because Billie just decides, okay, what's popular? Hip-hop, tracks about being the king of the crop or whatever the case may be, being queen bitch or something like that. It's definitely a track that is very much a braggadocious track, or at least at the very least feels that way because the chorus and really the entire song just goes so hard.
Oh, absolutely, man. And like there's another track in this album where Billie shows her pop culture nerddom, but the whole title off of this track, it references the line in the hit BBC show Sherlock. There's a scene where Moriarty is talking to Sherlock, and if you all want to know what that exact quote is, just rewind this episode, see the beginning of this episode, and that is that exact quote there. You should see me in a crown. And this song goes so hard, dude. And there's a couple different elements, this song could stand by itself. You don't really need to look into the lyrics. I didn't even take one note on the lyrics here. But how that chorus just pops and it how it just flows so amazingly. This is definitely a huge highlight off the album. And one thing I really do love in the chorus where that whole one by one and how it keeps rising, that's really cool, man.
It is and what it shows is that you can make a basic pop track or a basic banger, as the kids say, and still have little hints of musical, like you say, nerddom or little intricacies where you're just like, oh, that's interesting. That's cool that they did that. But ultimately, I agree with you. I don't agree with you that's my favorite song on the album. I will agree with you that it goes so hard and there's really not much more to go into than that. It's just if you want to try, if you're looking to add to your gym mix or your walking mix or punching bag mix, this song right here very much encapsulates that. It's just a good throwdown track.
You know what mix it's gonna go into for me?
What's that?
You should really listen to this mix that I made on Spotify for us.
Ooh, there you go. Yes, your Spotify playlist that you just started about a week or so ago.
Yeah, so for all of you who are listening to this, hop on our social media page, and if playlists are really your thing, and you really just want to really just see the highlights of what Matt and I think are off the albums that we discuss, just feel free to follow that playlist on Spotify. I will update it every single time we release an episode. So yeah, I think it would be a nice. I think it would be a nice thing for us, me and Matt, to look back on. And for those of you who are listening right now, feel free to check it out, man.
Yeah, and perhaps maybe in the future I might make a said playlist of my own.
Oh, by the way, I invited you to collaborate on that.
That's true, but that is a way to I can just add to that list and make things simpler for both of us.
Yeah, that's the one nice thing I like about Spotify, but I digress. Are you ready to go on to All the Good Girls Go to Hell?
Yes.
All right, so you want to kick this one off?
I'll kick this one off, and this one kind of takes a step back sonically from You Should See Me in a Crown. And honestly, it feels kind of like, I wouldn't say an ordinary track, but definitely a track that, it's one where you would have to listen to the lyrics or look at the lyrics to garner any sense of depth, because musically, it's fine. It's okay. It's not like big time anything to write home about, but it's still a very solid track.
Yeah, and even deep diving into the lyrics, there's really not much here. It's the whole spinning religion on its head. And that's been done a million times before, to be honest with you. I mean, hell, last episode we were just talking about the Smiths, Vicar and a Tutu, and while that's not specifically about religion, that was an interesting dichotomy between the way people feel like they should live their lives, and somebody just comes off then is completely bizarre, but hey, that person just wants to live their life. But lyrics here that give way to what kind of death Billy's going for here are: all the good girls go to hell because even God herself has enemies. Oh my goodness, God is a woman. Look out. And once the water starts to rise and heaven's out of sight, she'll want the devil on her team. There's really not much here. I feel like the biggest highlight off the track here is just the beat and the change up here, because we go from a dark, sinister tone and You Should See Me in a Crown to I don't know, a old school kind of hip hop feel, and what I mean old school hip hop, this is gonna make me sound ancient, maybe early 2000s kind of feel, where just bling era transitioning into what we have now, that kind of feel, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely sort of the old school trap. Very reminiscent of the late aughts and the early tens, which even now coming out of my mouth also makes me feel ancient. But oh well, time moves on. It waits for no one. And aside from that, I'm pretty sure it's just a matter of if you're listening to this album and this track comes on, it keeps the momentum up. It doesn't really stand out or jump out at you, but it also doesn't make you bad track. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, and if you listen in a little bit, you can appreciate the different dynamics of it. But like to be honest with you, like the biggest thing that I remember off this track, my dude, is just the vibe off of it, and which is not necessarily a bad thing because again, this is what Billy is kind of going for the most part. Tracks that you can vibe off to. Vibe off to, wow, phrasing. But in terms of depth, song structure, yeah, really not much here. And I will say the outro is kind of weird, where just out of nowhere you hear her say "Oh, I can't do the snowflake." I feel we made fun of Kanye West for having some sort of ADHD, but I feel like in a couple spots in this album, especially at least going right out of the gate with that opening skit into bad guy, Billy kind of has goldfish brain.
I could agree with that. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think that it's better from Billy's mouth because she's just coming at it from a purest pop sense. You talk about this track being mostly vibes. In pop, vibes are essential. So she at least has that nailed down. And she's not arrogant about her ADHD, although it does bring up a fact I did want to bring up real quick before we move on to the next song, is that unlike a lot of the albums we've covered recently, heck, probably the majority of them over the last month and a half, until the end of this album, there really isn't a theme aside from those vibes. The theme of this pop album is pop. Lyrically, it jumps all over the place. It goes from, I'm a bad guy, but then again, I'm a good guy because I don't take drugs. Therefore, I'm the greatest because I think I am. But am I really because religion says I'm not? And then we get to the next track, which not only continues the trend of what are you talking about, but also starts the center of the album, which I'm going to come right out and say is my least favorite part of the album.
Well, I'm curious to see, where you would say, the center actually is, because there is one specific track off of here, I had one word to start out with, but we'll get to it when we get to it. But the whole track that's leading off your least favorite part is "Wish You Were Gay," and it's an interesting song to say the least. I feel like this is the first time that we get the acoustic guitar strumming beat in this whole album, which that tracks in terms of what I can remember of the album so far. And I do appreciate how the chorus does land with the nice thickness of it. But yeah, I'm gonna let you chime in here because I feel like you might have some opinions and thoughts and feelings about what I just said.
First of all, I will say that you're talking about the acoustic guitar. I think this is Billy sort of going with the, I don't know, I wouldn't call it overthinking it, but I think she's going with the whole, hey, maybe this acoustic, hipstery, ukulele, Spotify type of range is, is still a hip thing, maybe that's what she was going for here, but even if it is, or whether it is or not, it definitely switches the mood of the album big time. As far as the lyrics are bad, but they are a little... I kind of got the same vibe from this song as I did from the likes of Vicar in a Tutu, where it just feels like Billy is trying a little too hard to make a controversial point. And it's also the fact that she's trying to sound funny or comedic, or even in a sense ironic, but in a humorous way that's just trying way too hard. I mean, I think between those two things, the trying too hard lyrics and the switch from banger beats to acoustic hipster vibe, kind of down this track for me a little bit. It's not a terrible track, but just kind of not for me.
I don't mind it, like, nearly as much. But, like, one thing that I will say, like, as I was dissecting the lyrics off of it, like, clever little thing that I realized that she did is there's a set of lyrics that goes, "Is there a 12 step just for you? Our conversations are all in blue. 11, hey haze. 10, fingers tearing out my hair. 9 times you made it out there. I ate alone at 7. You were 6 minutes away." Like, and then, like, as satisfactory as it would have been for her to continue with that little countdown, I think that gives way to, like, the mindset of, like, oh, hey, is there a 12 step for you? And she gets all the way down to, like, the 6th step. But, well, actually, I don't know. I think it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Like, I think it goes up instead of down. I don't know. I've never been in a 12-step program. Have you?
No.
No. Okay. I just wanted to double check that there. But no, I like it. It kind of gives way to, like, hey, like, she made it this far and now she's back at square one. But one thing I will say though, like, this song is basically about Billie dealing with rejection, about wishing that the guy that she had, like, feelings for was gay instead of just not being interested in her. And, like, I'm like, come on, man, that's like, I don't know. I mean, I get the sentiment, and, like, the song it like, there's a couple different elements, but, like, that whole, like, what the whole song centers around, it's kind of like, it's not for me either. Overall, though, I feel like I'm a little bit more into the song than you are.
Probably. And furthermore, like, I will give credit, the concept behind what the song's about is at least interesting, and I agree with you that the countdown lyrics are creative. But yeah, the song that kind of reminded me was, well, again, aside from Vicar in a Tutu, which again was a song that took its own humor way too seriously. And again, I think this song does the same thing. It also reminded me a sense of Girl Crush by Little Big Town, where it's centered around this sort of cheap love joke, where just, like, you hear it, you're just like, ha ha, ha 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 ha, I get it. Is this the rest of the song? Cool.
It almost kind of reminds me of, like, I don't know. I never listened to the song, but was it Katy Perry who came out with the song "You're So Gay"?
Yes, I have not heard that song, but yes, she is the one who sang that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that, and I know that we would never, unless, like, you are morbidly curious, we will never discuss Katy Perry on this podcast, because I feel like that's the one artist that gives you the most rage, at least back in the day.
I don't know if it definitely wasn't her that gave me the most rage. That would have been Selena Gomez, which even that I could possibly tone back a little bit, but that's another pop discussion for another day. You ready to move on to When the Party's Over?
All right. So the next track off the album is called "When the Party Is Over," or "When the Party's Over," for how the track is actually, like, spelled out there. So this is actually the second single off the album, and I didn't realize this was actually, like, a big song, because again, talking to Jamie, my wife, about this album, like, she said, like, there was a not a Stray Kids, but, like, it could have been a Stray Kids artist member that did a cover off this, but a K-pop artist did a cover off of this song here. And apparently, like, they're very selective of what covers that they do. So yeah, apparently this is a huge song.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a huge song. I'm looking up the numbers now. It only made it as far as number 29 on the charts, which, to be fair, is pretty big. I mean, it's a higher chart single than you and or I have ever had. But that being said, it's honestly like this song's pretty good. It definitely tilts back to the vibes of the first few songs on the album. Definitely more hip hop influenced, more modern pop influenced than "Wish You Were Gay" was. And interestingly enough, this is the first song on the album that Billie did not write. All credit goes to her brother Phineas, who she co-produced the album with and co-wrote most of the album with. But in this case, Phineas was the only writer of the track. And I didn't like this track very much, but after a second listen, I was like, okay, it's fine. It's another fine track. It's definitely got the hookiness to it, but ultimately, would I say this is like a track that really stands out to me? Not necessarily.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. There's some moments off this track here where I'm like, I can really get behind it. Like, I would kind of call it a gospel choir to start out. It's kind of nice to kick off the song here. The vocal harmonies are pretty tight. But one thing that I kind of don't care for is the chorus and how the chorus goes. And I could say I like it like that, like it like that. It's kind of dizzying. I mean, there's a couple moments here that are decent, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's a lot a lot of moments off of this album where it has the potential to be really, really great, but then there's moments where I really can't give it I can't really commit myself to what this album has what Billie's having to say, what this album has to offer.
Yeah, I think again it does feel like it vibes with the first part of the album, but doesn't feel very original compared to and in a sense that does. And there's another track on here that Phineas wrote just by himself that kind of falls in that same category, where you can tell that whatever rawness or vibe in a spiritual sense that Billie's going for is kind of missing. And this is one of those tracks where it feels more like a standard pop track more than any other song on the album. And I don't mind that, but again, it doesn't elevate the song to a level of, give me more of this Bad Guy or You Should See Me in a Crown did.
Yeah. And I will say, the other elements that I do care for in this song here, which, this song is a mixed bag of nuts here, is, Billie actually does sing in here, even though she does sound very defeated. And, this whole song is basically kind of we take the concept of, these two toxic people, that are in this relationship, and one's turning to the other and being like, don't you know that I'm no good for you? And the whole concept of when the party's over, it's basically when the lights come up and you realize, hey, this is who I'm with, and realizing that this is the person that I'm actually committing myself to, and holy crap, I might be looking for the exit, and that other person's looking at me saying, hey, I'm not really a good person. And there's some some self awareness that's going on here, but I don't know, it's not for me in terms of the overall package. Is it horrible? No, but it's not good. It's landing on okay to decent in my opinion.
I fully agree. It's a track that exists, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, so you ready to move on to 8?
Yes, let's move on to 8.
All right, so you want to hear something about this song? So when the first 10 seconds happened off of this song here, I had one word in my brain.
What was that word?
What? Like, the vocals are so bad to start out this track here, man. Like, if you've not listened to, for those of you who are listening to this podcast, and you've not listened to this song, pause the pod, go check out this track, come back, and then you'll understand what I'm talking about. But, like, yeah, I know what she's going for with that, like, squeaky, chipmunky kind of vocal where she's trying to be, like, childlike innocent. But no, I'm not here for it whatsoever, man.
No, I can't say I was either. Again, coming off of the relatively disappointing trend for, the acoustic guitar on Wish You Were Gay, this is like that with those vocals equipped with it. Definitely an instant turnoff to the point where even though the rest of the track isn't as bad, it's not enough to swing things back in favor of this track being a good track.
Yeah. Like, in my notes here, man, like, I have her talk about, wait a minute, let me finish. I know you don't care, but can you listen? I wrote, no, I can't. But, like, I don't know. Like, there's other notes I hear how I have is, the song is about the interplay between, like, someone treating someone badly in a relationship, and lyrics that exemplify this are, you said, don't treat me badly, but you said it so sadly, so I did my best I could, not thinking you would have left me gladly. I know you're not sorry. Why should you be? 'Cause who I am to be in love when your love never is for me. But, like, I don't know, like, it's not as bad as Kanye West's I'm in It, but, like, that absolutely, no, that, like, instant skip for me. Like, this, like, it's funny, whenever I was rating this album, I had it at a slightly higher rating. Just because of that little snippet by itself, it instantly dropped the whole album down by 1 point for me.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just like, I'll give it a decent rating, and I'm like, nope, going down by 1.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So I think we should do ourselves a favor and not talk about this track anymore, and move on to My Strange Addiction.
All right. So, for those of you who are not aware about Billie Eilish, she is a fan of the hit TV show called The Office, which, for those of you who are like, what is an office? One, like, did you just come out of a coma for, like, the past 30 years? And two, you must be cell shocked to, like, listen to a podcast. But I digress here. So this song features several clips from The Office, and I'm going to give my opinion about it here in a second, but what is your feeling about this track, man?
My feeling about it is that it's sort of in the same vein as When the Party's Over, as far as a relatively straightforward pop song. I will say it's better than When the Party's Over. I think the samples are interesting. I don't know if they really add too much to the song, but ultimately I think the lyrics of talking about how, I mean, I do like the vocals on it. The lyrics are fine. I do like the beat a lot. I do like sort of the shuffle. And it definitely brings back, again, the vibes that made this album good to start with and goes away from what it was before. I do like the little bits where the vocals go, ah, and then back to, ah. I thought that was kind of cool, too. Again, Phineas wrote this himself. Billy did not. But it definitely feels better and more upbeat and more thematic in a slight sense than When the Party's Over. And even When All the Good Girls Go to Hell, for being honest.
Yeah. So, I feel like, at least lyrically, this is a rehash of Bad Guy in terms of, like, themes where, like, talking about, like, hey, this is somebody that you can't quit, and, like, I know that you're bad for me, but, I still can't quit you. But, like, I kind of... Unfortunately, this song, it's not as bad as 8, and it didn't bring down the whole album by like one point for me. But like it's gonna go in the bottom third. And as much as I'm like I'm a huge fan of the show The Office. Like the samples that are like spruced in there from time to time, they absolutely don't add anything to the song. They actually kind of take away from it in a at least in a like a stylistic point. And I don't know, like again, lyrical themes aren't that bad, but the chorus doesn't do it for me. I mean, the beat is pretty nice with the falling sifts, but like again, this is like a huge mixed bag of nuts, and I think what brings this track down ultimately is, ironically enough, the Office samples, because it just seems like she just wanted to include, or he wanted to include her brother, like the Office into this album.
I get that. I wasn't as turned off by the samples because, quite frankly, I wasn't sure what they were in the first place. And again, that might have something to do with the fact that I need to watch the remainder of The Office before I can be like, oh, I know what that's from. But to go to your point about it not doing a whole lot for you, this is what I mean by the fact that the middle of this album is not great. Because you have two songs that are solid, okay-ish in When the Party's Over and slightly better in My Strange Addiction, counteracting with these two duds that kill the vibe of the album sonically, which were Wish You Were Gay and 8, to the point where the other two songs really can't climb back out of that. And honestly, the first time I listened to it, I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'm not going to like this album as much as I thought I was gonna, and maybe this is kind of a disappointing album that shouldn't have won Album of the Year. Thankfully, the remainder of the album, in my opinion, redeems the whole thing, and it starts with Bury a Friend.
So, Bury Your Friend. You know what kind of vibes I got off of it, man?
What's that?
Black Skinhead.
Yeah, I completely agree. That the second time around, I'm thinking, yeah, this is definitely a Black Skinhead type track. Although, thematically, it's not the same, because heaven forbid the day that Billie Eilish starts talking about the roots of African culture. We're not ready for that yet.
Yeah, but it's interesting, like, it might be just a byproduct of us, like, just, dissecting so many albums of, like, we can hear, like, this or this, and, like, different, like, influences, which is actually kind of cool, because it, like, I've always wanted to be that kind of person who's just like, oh, you can hear, like, the Kinks and this influence here, and I'm like, sure, I really can't, but, like, thankfully, due to, like, a little project here, we can. But, going back into, like, Bury Your Friend, so this track is where we get the album title from, and there's a lyric in here that literally reads, when we all fall asleep, where do we go? And on first initial read of this track here, like, according to Genius.com, like, this track is basically kind of like Billy dialoguing with the monster underneath her bed, but I feel like this is maybe like a inner dialogue with her and her dark side, where, like, she's contending with that, kind of like, maybe a rehash of, like, the earlier track Zanny, where she's thinking about taking the, like, wondering about, like, why people take, like, this, like, leap into, like, pill addiction. But now you go into Bury a Friend, where she's literally contending with the dark side that's vocalizing to her, what do you want from me? Why don't you run from me? What are you wondering? What don't you know? It's a pretty good song in my opinion. But yeah, like in terms of like dissecting meaning off of it, like I had to claw away in it, and I feel like what I'm gonna walk away from it is actually pretty nice.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to correct something I said earlier in this podcast. I said that I like the vocal like on the previous track. That's actually on this track. So let me make that correction right now. Also, as far as your theory about deep diving into the lyrics of this song, I think that's one thing that I think Billie gets right too throughout the entirety. Well, not the entirety, obviously, as we were just talking like the last 4 tracks, but entirety in a sense of pop intended for a pop audience, intended for a mass audience, can't go too deep. And I know that's not necessarily the most intellectual thing to admit, but in a sense, understanding your audience is a big part of success and having an audience. So, realistically, there's no real need to deep dive into the lyrics because basically it's a simple thought of, okay, she's battling herself, she might be losing, and that's it. And I think the lyrics convey that very well in the pop sense. Again, the beat's great. Again, the lyrics basically go into this concept of, dealing with depression. And what's interesting is that I heard these lyrics and I'm thinking, okay, we've had hints of depression and sort of, wondering of self-worth earlier in the album, but we haven't got a full-on decision of, okay, I'm starting to think about the bad place. I'm starting to think about the dark place. In a way that was very similar to a lot of Turn Out the Lights, where Julian Baker was wrestling with that for the entire album. This is really the first time we hear that from Billie here. And it kind of goes back to the point I made earlier about a lot of the themes lyrically on this album not being consistent. That changes here, because this becomes a theme throughout the remainder of the album.
Well, we'll get into that here. But yeah, I don't think there's much else I can talk about with Bury a Friend. So you want to go into the next track?
Yes, we're going to go into the track, I know I'm probably going to butcher this, Ilo Milo.
Sure. Like your guess was as good as mine. But so I'll kick off this track here. So this kind of does kick off the last leg of the album here. Like one could argue that Bury a Friend was kicking off the last leg, and maybe the next track would, but I feel like this kind of like, maybe starts like, kick off the last leg here. So it's an interesting start to this track, and it's almost kind of like has like a childlike feel. The chorus doesn't kind of feel like a chorus here. Let me pull up the lyrics of that real quick, if you would be so kind to indulge me. Dun, 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 dun. So the chorus goes, where did you go? I should know, but it's so cold. I don't want to be lonely, so show me the way, cause I can't lose another life. And like, it doesn't pop. It doesn't do anything noteworthy. It kind of just seems like it's a verse that just repeats. But I feel like this song is basically about the fear of losing, the fear of loving someone. Like, where she's talking about, she show me the way home. I can't lose another life, and another life being like, just the life that you have with somebody that you love. What are your thoughts on this song, man?
I pretty much, I think you nailed it right on the head. Again, the lyrics do change through each chorus a little bit. The first chorus ends with, so show me the way home, I can't lose another life. The next one is, So tell me you'll come home, even if it's just a lie. And then the song ends with, was hoping you'd come home. I don't care if it's a lie.
Yeah.
So basically, a lot of it is not just, I need someone to love in my life, I need it right now. And I don't care if you change your mind again. I just need you to change your mind back for this moment. And the way it's performed and the way it's presented is pretty hitting, and it is pretty deep. And I remember the first time listening to this thinking, okay, I like this song a lot. It's very simplistic. And again, going back to the vibes from Julian Baker on Turn Up the Lights, it feels like this could be a track on that album in a sense, in its sense of darkness and understanding. But at the same time, it does follow that traditional verse, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, chorus vibe. So again, Billie not sacrificing that brain set of, hey, let's make this so everyone can understand it. Which, again, not to say that Julian Baker didn't do that, but that's not what she was going for.
Okay. Yeah. You kind of hit the nail right on the head. So, for lack of, like, I really don't have anything else to add. Like, the only thing I kind of will say is the song does kind of build, and the reverby, hurry, I'm worried, it's kind of nice. And it, like, really kind of ties that emotional, like, like, the emotional elements of the song to, like, the rest of it. But yeah, not much else I can say about this. You ready to go on to Listen Before I Go?
Yes, I'm ready to move on, even though this song is, again, keeps on with the same theme of the last two tracks of feeling desperate and lonely and defeated. Like you've been mentioning through this album, she sounds defeated. Well, the words on this track are that of ultimate defeat. And we talked a couple episodes ago, particularly in the song Hurt Less from Julian Baker, where she kind of comes to and realizes, hey, maybe if I'm with somebody, or with you for a little bit, it'll make this whole situation hurt less. This is a song that basically would take away that possibility. This, you could almost call this song Hurt More, in a sense.
Yeah, hurt more, man. So, the way that I kind of walked away from this song here, it's basically about, like, somebody who's about to commit suicide, and like the only other track that we listened to before that really had that, like, at least, like, theme in it was track X by Black Country New Road. And that song, it almost seemed like there was some sort of warm embrace to it. This song does not have that whatsoever. Like, it's kind of a cold song, and it just seems like she's given up. Like, lyrics saying, if you need me, want to see me, better hurry because I'm leaving soon. And other lyrics of, like, taste me, the salty tears on my cheek, what a year-long headache, that's what a year-long headache does to you. I'm not okay. I feel so scattered. Don't say I'm all that matters. Leave me, deja vu. And, like, the way that the track ends with, like, that ambulance and city noise, like, the song begins with her on a rooftop, and it just seems like she's dialoguing on, like, whether it's in person or on a phone with somebody, and she's about to jump. And, like, yeah, it's an incredibly dark song. Yeah. Not much else I can say about it. Like, it has nice, like, I like the piano in it, but holy cow, dude, like, what a depressing song.
Yeah, in fact, just to highlight how depressing it is, you know what it just reminded me of, without giving away too many spoilers? The end of the penultimate episode of one BoJack Horseman called The View from Halfway Down.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I could see that.
That's you for some reason, you explaining that and all the imagery that in my head of, talking on the phone to someone, having a dialogue with them. As soon as you heard, it's like, oh no, not that episode again. It's a great episode, but man alive, oof. Yeah, I mean, as far as depressing songs about suicide go, I would say sonically this is a very good one, up there with one of the better ones. The one thing I will say, and I don't want to get into a hour long diatribe of the merits and the emotions of this heavy subject, but what got me is that you mentioned how she talks about having salty tears, and she talks about saying, call my friends and tell them that I love them and then I'll miss them. What's weird is that I've heard so many times that people talk about having that feeling of wanting to go, and you talk about how a lot of this album, or not this album, this song feels so cold in its response. I feel like there's just that teeny little bit of warmth and regret in there. There's that part of her inside that says, I don't want to do this. Even though the general vibe of the song altogether is, I'm going to do this and I have done this. And one more thought I'll have on this before we move on is that we were talking earlier about, her target audience and how, you were talking about these are what kids are listening to these days. I don't disagree, but I'm just hoping they don't listen to this and think those things. Like I kind of hope they listen to if they do listen to it, it's part of the album as a whole, and that they are not inspired to do this because it is that depressing of a song.
Yeah. If anything, it might give them solace in the fact that, hey, they're not alone in this feeling. But again, kids are kind of impressionable. But yeah, ready to move on to "I Love You"?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, so "I Love You," which I feel like is the last proper song off the album. It starts with a very tender opening with a gentle guitar and Billie's soft vocals, and it seems like she's actually kind of crying in them. But I love the feeling in the build up in the chorus in this song in particular, because it almost feels like waves are building up, and it just feels like it builds up and it gives a good pop off with the phrase "I love you."
Yeah, and I do like this. Again, it feels like another track that could have come right from the cutting room floor of "Turn Out the Lights." The harmonies where the two voices come together and saying, "You didn't mean to say I love you, and I don't want to." I think this is a song that, again, it's a little depressing, but at least shows that there was once hope, and there was once, a possible connection, and that because there was once a connection, there could be one again. So, in that sense, it's a lot more optimistic than Listen Before I Go, because it tends to say, okay, there is a solution here. I'm acknowledging the solution, and even though right now it's a problem, there is a solution that can be done.
Yeah, yeah. Again, a whole lot of nothing else that I can add to this. I feel like, I don't know if it's listener fatigue or just a lack of contact that you can really sink your teeth into, or if we're just doing such a good job, dissecting it, which I'm just going to go with the latter of those three options there. But I will just add to this here that the lyrics here do show the struggle about being trapped in a bad relationship, with lyrics exemplifying this being, we fall apart as it gets dark. I'm in your arms in Central Park. There's nothing you can do or say. I can't escape the way I love you. I don't want to, but I love you. And it's almost kind of like the contrast to the song, which is "When the Party's Over," where the bad person's looking at the good person and being like, "Hey, I'm no good for you," and the good person's looking at the bad person in this track being like, "I don't want to, but I love you." And it's interesting, like, looking back at, like, different songs. I don't know if Billy meant to write, or Billy and Phineas meant to write these tracks and, like, this kind of, like, dynamic. But it's kind of cool looking back on that, man.
It is. And one more thought I have, because you're talking about us, dissecting the lyrics really well. Again, I think she's not putting in a whole lot of, like, particularly with what Morrissey did on The Queen is Dead, or what Julian Baker did, or especially Phoebe Bridgers on Punisher. Like, when they sing songs about, it's Halloween, or, I was using a payphone, like, there's not a whole, like those moments where you're like, oh, I wonder what they mean by that. I wonder what that's all about. It feels like a little Easter egg inside the album. There are no Easter eggs here. Easter is done. This is ordinary time as far as lyrical content. And Billie pretty much, she spells out in a way that everyone can understand, which, again, for this being a pop album, a pure pop album, hits the mark. So I think we're doing a good job of dissecting the lyrics, but I think this is not necessarily the deepest album lyrically to dissect.
Yeah, and then even on top of that, like, the different kind of, like, themes, and, like, just what some of the songs, especially in the back half of the album, they are what they are. Like, there's not really too much to go into it. Like, and especially with the last song, if you allow me to indulge in going into it, it's called Goodbye. Like, I feel like it's just a nice capstone off the album. Like, like, the lyrics are basically a mishmash of the different spots off the album with, don't you know I'm no good for you, baby, I don't feel so good, and all the good girls go to hell, bite my tongue, bide my time, what is it about them, I'm the bad guy. And that's the last lyric you hear off the album. And I'm a sucker for whenever albums do this, where, like, the last track does, harken back to, like, different themes and different, like, lyrical samples off, like, off the previous songs. Like, heck, like, one of my favorite albums of all time is The Greatest Generation by the Wonder Years, and the song Sell Out My Funeral, well, I Just Want to Sell Out My Funeral, like, it literally does this. So anytime, like, an artist like Billie would do this, like, I can't help but be impressed with it. So yeah, again, I can dig it. It's a good way to end the album.
Yeah, I admit I'm not as hot on that concept. Well, I mean, I don't mind that concept, but I felt like this one was a little bit on the forced side, but at the same time, not to the point where I would disavow it or say it's a bad track. It's a fine closer. I mean, like you said, it pretty much wraps up the themes on the album in a solid way. It's sort of like a more of a musical epilogue or coda to all the lyrics on the album. So, and considering how good the other tracks were before it, I'm willing to give this one a pass. So yeah, it's a solid way to end the album.
So we did it, man.
We did it.
We discovered when we go to sleep, where do we all go? And we just discovered that, oh, hold on, there's a doggy there. Not anymore. Matt, you are entitled to, like, include this in the episode, especially at the end here, because I think that would be kind of cute.
Oh, okay. Noted.
But yeah, overall, like, I would feel like this album, my overall impression, other than the song 8, like, I kept thinking, this is going to make my wife, who's within earshot, absolutely kind of crack up and laugh here a little bit. But on Christmas, our nephew kept going into a room at her aunt's house, and he kept saying, "This is a nice room. This is a nice room." Like, and I kept feeling like that off this whole album. Like, there's a couple different nice elements off of there. Is there any, like, I know I really kind of geeked over You Should See Me in a Crown, but, like, all truth be told, is that song absolutely amazing? Is it cutthroat? Is it gonna make my absolute bangers list? Probably not. But is it a good song? Are the majority of the songs off of this album good songs? Yeah, I would say so. So with that in mind, I'm gonna give this album a 6 out of 10.
You're giving it a 6.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 6. I'm curious to see what you're gonna give it, because I either I gave it a lower rating than you did or a higher rating.
I'm kind of surprised by the 6 just based on what you said. I thought we were going to go a little higher with it. But I respect it. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 7 out of 10. Pretty much the same thoughts as you. I thought most of the songs were pretty good. I think if you take away Wish You Were Gay an 8, this album probably is at least an 8, if not an 8.5. But yeah, I just think that ultimately there's too many tracks that are kind of okay, and of course 2 tracks in the middle that really just sort of sink the whole album down. It's a solid pop album, and I would just take that for what it's worth from here on out. So I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10.
I would say the reason why I gave this a 6 out of 10, and I'm going to partially blame you, but which is kind of a backhanded compliment now that I'm thinking about this here. But whenever, I don't know, I think whenever we were talking about Phoebe Bridgers, Julian Baker, and when we did the Joni Mitchell run, you mentioned the lack of I forget which album you mentioned that in. It might have been Phoebe's album, where there was a lack of songs that you could return to and be like, this is hitting me like lightning. If 8 didn't have that baby chipmunky kind of vocals here, this is an easy 7 out of 10. It's a good album, not a great album, but it is a good album. But because of just how awful that particular track is, and I would say even the ham-fisted nature of My Strange Addiction, where they include that Office sample, it holds it and makes it an okay album, in my opinion. Would I rather listen to this compared to Babel? Yeah. Would I rather listen to this compared to Yeezus? Yeah, to be honest with you. I feel like I gave Yeezus, if I'm not mistaken, I gave it a 5 out of 10. Okay. So, yeah, that does track. There's tracks off of here as a whole. I feel like Billie is a much stronger songwriter, even though, there's elements where she is influenced by Kanye. But, yeah, that explains my rating. So, that being said, if you like this style and you want to explore different artists that do this style, one artist came to mind, and that's an artist by the name of FKA Twigs, and the album that I'm going to officially recommend from her discography is LP1. And the reason why I'm recommending this artist and this album, it's again that minimalist style, pop elements. It does do it's a little bit brighter compared to this album here, but it has that same kind of formula, but it expands upon it, man.
Okay, all right. I'm trying to think what album I would go with in this regard, because I feel trying to think of what album would really fall in line that I've given a good hard listen to. Because this album, in a sense, is very much in line with our alternative mindset of sort of jumping all over the place. I'm trying to think of what album would go with that. This is tough. Crap. You know what? I'm going to go on a different path here, because you mentioned minimalism and sort of achieving a sound or a vibe, that same amount. I'm actually going to go with an album from your neck of the woods, kind of, and go with the 2010 release by one Black Keys called Brothers. Very minimalist. Sort of achieves the same thing in a rock setting, and kind of lyrically goes all over the place. Ultimately, it's more about vibes than anything else, and it's very successful in that regard. So, Brothers is my official recommendation based off of a Billie Eilish album. Does it make sense? No. Could I think of anything else? No. So I'm going with it.
I was actually kind of surprised because my initial thought was going off of would be to do a Lorde album, the one that she did Royals, and I think it was like Heroin or My Heroin,
Pure Heroin.
Pure Heroin. But if that's your recommendation, then there you go, man. I actually kind of changed up my recommendation because I thought that's what you would do, but I digress. This is what we're sticking with. Answers are locked in. So anything else you want to say about Billie Eilish, this album as a whole, before I reveal what our last review of January is going to be?
Not much, except I will say if this is her version of pop at a very minimalist, basic budget type, it will be interesting to dig into some of our other stuff and see if it improves on that, changes it, or maybe redefines what her definition of pop is. But that's all I gotta say for now.
Yeah, and I feel like in the next album that she did, and I could be completely wrong with saying this because, like, with my listening style, sometimes I just have the musical ADD of, like, hey, I'm going to listen to this and just completely scrub it from my memory. Unless, like, it's an album that we discuss, and then I'm like, okay, I actually know this album pretty well. But, yeah, like, it's again, overall, like, I do stand by my statement that this is a good album for the most part. If you take out 8, it is a good album. Like, there's just some elements that I can see it might hit a little bit harder for some people, and but for me, like, mostly it's a good album. Just one part was a complete, like, poop stain, in my opinion. But I mean, that's just me. I'm entitled to my own opinion. So Matt, I got a question for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I've been waiting to hear what you got.
All right. So for the final review of January of 2024, we are going to be discussing Disintegration by The Cure.
Ooh.
All right. So we're going to go from minimalist, post 2020, pop to, like, maximalist, like 1980s alternative rock.
I accept your challenge. It's gonna be a good way to end January.
All right. So, do you have anything else to say before we officially sign off here?
No, I think again, just want to thank everyone who's been listening or watching on YouTube, whatever it is that we've been doing. We appreciate your continued support. If you like what you're listening to, tell a friend, put it on your socials, and keep supporting us because we're going to keep talking music one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. And best way that you can support us if you do like what you hear is to like, subscribe, follow us, rate, review us on, like, whatever platform that you're listening to us on. We should be on everything at this point, and if you guys want additional content, feel free to follow us on all social media platforms. Well, not all, like, we don't have Snapchat or, like, TikTok because nobody has time for that, but we are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads. Tagline is TT Hey Listen. We like Matt did allude to, that we are on YouTube as well, and yeah. And if you guys are interested in giving your input on the show in a more direct fashion, feel free to email us at ttheylisten@gmail.com. Also, you can use that platform as a springboard to launch episode ideas off to us on. But yeah, for the last time in this episode, he is Matthew Durzik.
He's Ryan Kearns.
And cut.